So my name is Ivana Lukic, and I'm Senior Maritime Policy and Planning Consultant. I work for ESPON Sustainable Projects as well as Submariner Network for Blue Growth, both based in Berlin, Germany, beautiful maritime city of Berlin, Germany. Now, the Submariner Network itself is basically a network of communication and cooperation platform for actors and initiatives in the Baltic Sea working together for more sustainable and innovative uses of marine resources in the Baltic, but also beyond. Now, okay, so we can skip to the first slide, please. Excellent. Okay, so the topics that Submariner Network is managed by ESPON Sustainable Projects, which is a professional management, project management consultancy, initiating and managing, coordinating projects, dealing mainly with maritime policy, maritime planning, and again, sustainable, innovative uses of maritime resources. The Submariner Network and its members, who are technology parks, SMEs, industry, regional authorities as well in the Baltic Sea, but also beyond, they work together on several topics. Now on this slide, you can see a couple of these topics, such as blue biotechnology, blue bioeconomy in general, encompassing different types of aquaculture, sustainable aquaculture, be it mussel, seaweeds, and so on. But also what is important, it also focuses on renewable energies, predominantly offshore wind, so offshore wind farms, and smart combinations. So how offshore wind farms can be integrated sustainably into the existing context offshore, where we have lots of other uses as well. So really smart offshore renewable energy combinations. Now on the next slide, you see the rationale. So why are we talking about the offshore wind in the Baltic Sea? So 2 gigawatts have already been installed in the Baltic, Germany leading with Denmark, Sweden, as well as Finland also having important wind farms already offshore. However, by 2030, we could see up to 9 gigawatts installed in the Baltic and 85 by 2050. Those are the Wind Europe predictions from 2 years ago. Now, maritime spatial planning as a tool had a key role in offshore wind development to date, and it is expected to continue to be one of the key tools for sustainable integration of offshore renewables, for a more strategic approach to planning of our oceans. Now, offshore wind, we see that it will continue to grow, include not only offshore wind, but also all other types of renewable energies offshore, and even in the Baltic and in many other European sea basins, including the Mediterranean. This is still an untapped potential. And these new developments seek space and seek acceptance also from the local communities and from other sectors and users that already operate in the sea. Now, the next slide is very visual. And you see here a concept of how renewable energies can actually coexist. So I said offshore renewables, we will see more and more of that in the coming future. So we have to find ways to see how they can coexist and multi-use the ocean space with other uses, such as fisheries, such as the aquaculture, very much present in the Mediterranean, as well as tourism. So how to really not only minimize the conflicts, but also try to establish the synergies between these different sectors and ensure more sustainable integration of the offshore wind. So the integration of this multi-use concept can reduce demand for ocean space and contribute with important environmental, socioeconomic benefits. Now, on this next slide, you can see some of the examples from the Baltic and key potentials when it comes to the combination between offshore renewables with other uses. And the key benefits here are the mitigation of potential conflicts and increased acceptance of offshore wind projects if, for example, it is combined to a certain extent with the tourism sector. It can provide important socio-economic benefits to the local economy, such as the aquaculture, tourism, and so on. And it can also provide opportunity to move aquaculture further offshore to a more exposed site with, let's say, less environmental impacts. Aquaculture within offshore wind farms can be kind of sheltered. Offshore wind farms provide this sheltered environment, or it can be combined with wind energy that provides energy to the aquaculture site right from the source. So some of these examples have been explored in many of the places in the Baltic, including the Kriegers Flak in Sweden, in the Mermaid project, in a couple other offshore wind farms in Denmark. There is an existing example of the combination between offshore wind farms and tourism in Denmark as well. And this combination has also been explored in other projects and areas as well. Now, on the next slide, we see listed examples of offshore wind and tourism synergies. And I'm mentioning this because I think it's of relevance in Greece and in the Mediterranean in general. And it refers not only to the offshore wind as a sector, but renewable energies offshore in general. So the examples that are present so far and the opportunities when it comes to the combination of these two sectors are the sightseeing boat tours, so the boat tour to the offshore renewable energy site, or specially designed offshore platforms serving as a resting ground for seals or facilities for divers. Then unique wind farm design and layouts, which can serve as a tourist attraction almost, and a regional landmark. Then on-land information centers and museums, both tour operators can be engaged in offshore wind-related monitoring activities as well. And yeah, in Germany, there are also examples of helicopter flights around offshore wind farms. So the examples are available and exist in Denmark, for example, Belgium, Sweden, Germany, and the UK. However, what is interesting to note is the fact that regulation differs across countries. So especially when it comes to safety measures, that is, the safety issues and risks are perceived differently across countries, and this reflects in regulation that is applied differently. So countries have different safety zones. So next slide, please. So what you see on the next slide is not really possible everywhere. This is me on the top of the offshore wind pile. This happened in Denmark off the coast of Copenhagen, where you can actually take the boat offshore, go to the offshore wind farm, climb up to the top and open the nacelle and see the view. Of course, this is a guided tour, and it is not happening anywhere else in the world, but it's kind of an eye-opening because it shows that it can be possible. Maybe not this particular example, but combinations and synergies between tourism and offshore wind renewable energies are definitely possible. On the next slide, we have a couple of examples from countries and how do they deal with offshore wind and fishery interactions. Sorry, I think we have different slides. If you go to the next one, yeah, that's the one. Sorry. Okay. So in Denmark, we were talking about offshore wind and fisheries and how do they interact. In Denmark, for example, the passive fishery is allowed within offshore wind farms. And this is facilitated through the consultation process between developers, so offshore wind developers, and fishing industries to really discuss the potential mitigation measures. This is, for example, inclusion of fishermen in the construction and operation of offshore wind farms, and permitting passive fisheries inside the site. However, the cooperative organizations exist for insurance, and this is one, I think, important enabler where the membership is basically mandatory for all parties involved. Germany is currently in the negotiation process to consider allowing certain types of fisheries within offshore wind farms to a certain extent. So from 2020 onwards, navigation is allowed under certain conditions. Minimum 50 meters distance to turbines. There has to be a good visibility and so on. And negotiations again are ongoing with passive fishing techniques to take place within 50 meters of the offshore wind farm. And these are taking place as part of the MSP revision process. In the Netherlands and Belgium, there are a couple of examples of nature restoration or nature enhancement within offshore wind farms, such as cultivating seaweed, kelp forests, for example, or restoration of ancient oyster, so the North Sea flats, ancient flats, native flat oyster. These particular examples that I mentioned, so in the Netherlands and Belgium, are also being piloted in United project, where again Submariner Network has an important role. So in Belgium, the flat oyster again is being restored within the offshore wind farm, and in the Netherlands, the combination between the seaweed and solar, offshore solar, is being explored as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically the slide with a map of different pilots in the United project. 4 of those dealing with the different combinations with offshore wind farms, and they're actually being piloted in the real environment in the water. Next slide, please. This is an example of the tour that I have mentioned. So the boat tour that goes to the Middelgrunden wind farm off Copenhagen, so where people can climb up. You can even see the stairs and tourists climbing up to the top of the wind farm. You can take the pictures and so on. So what the project is currently working on is to see what are necessary safety measures that need to be followed, how this safety can be improved even more for people, and how the virtual tour can also take place when we now also live in COVID time. So when in-person visits are not possible, so is there an opportunity to have a virtual tour in a museum or something like that, so that even more local benefits are happening on the ground. On the next slide, so some important aspects, some important things to note when it comes to this case is that this wind farm was developed a long time ago, in 2000, if I'm not wrong. So it is quite old. It's a smaller one, but what was key here is that local communities were involved from the onset, from early start. So it was really discussed what sort of layout could fit well with the city of Copenhagen. So the original layout that was good when it comes to the efficiency and the wind and all that was not really accepted by the local communities. So the new layout was then proposed and developed together with the local communities, which was accepted and really looks nice. It's kind of the half moon shape around the city. And the turbine, so the offshore wind farm is also partially owned by the local cooperative, by the local people. And this ensures really that benefits are ending up locally, so to local communities, local businesses, and so on. And this has also enabled this synergy between the tourism and offshore wind as well. Next slide, please. Okay, 2 final slides, some lessons learned. Here I want to highlight that it is possible to move away from a one-time compensation, be it to local fishers or the tourism sector and so on. So it is possible to move away from one-time compensation towards a more long-term solutions that really respect the local culture, economy, and the environment. So this, my presentation really wanted to highlight that such opportunities are possible, and we do have some examples already in the Baltic, in the North Sea. Then benefit sharing structures, such as, for example, the cooperative offshore renewable energy ownership, which has been present on land for many decades, can work even for offshore projects and can provide important benefits again for the local economy. And we have Danish example as kind of a good practice for that. The third thing is that consideration of local needs and benefits should be built into the offshore renewable energy solutions right from the onset. And I think in the Mediterranean and many other places in the world where offshore wind and offshore renewables are just picking up, this is really an opportunity to consider these innovative solutions right from the onset, because adding something else later is quite difficult when licenses are already obtained and the planning process already took place. It's important to discuss this early on, to have an ongoing fora where such innovative solutions can be discussed and then potentially integrated as well. Next, last slide. And some key recommendations. So first one is to improve involvement of local tourism, fishing, and aquaculture sectors in early on in maritime spatial planning and offshore renewables planning processes in order to jointly identify opportunities and really ensure to have a long-term fora, not just one-time consultation, because people need time to build trust. Then there is a need to facilitate transfer of good practices across member states. We see that there is there is a palette of good practices that we have already. These need to be shared, centralized. So across member states, sea basins, and these are generated from existing examples. And the third thing, there is a need for support the development of viable business models and ensure capacity building for local tourism, aquaculture, fishing operators, so that they can see also the opportunity in offshore wind and they can take part in these communications and negotiations so that they have the capacity to do that. Okay, I think this is really the last slide. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer all the questions and engage after the conference as well.